common interests with Mr. Trump, screening being one of them.
Thinking that she's running for the Republican Party.
What we need to ensure that new Canadians have when they come here is a job.
There's two types of them. The ones who come here because they choose Canada and the ones who come here to use Canada.
When you serve Canadian, you can do it with your face uncovered.
If somebody wants to wear a niqab and be marginalized, it is their problem. I really don't give two hoots.
The shadow of Donald Trump looming large over Wednesday's Conservative leaders debate. Everyone acknowledged they'll need to work with Trump, but Kelly Leitch took it one step further, wasting little time in mentioning that she and the president-elect share ideas on immigration and border screening. But even she was careful not to actually endorse him. It was hard to deny, though, the impact of the resounding Republican victory the day before. So, with potential candidate Kevin O'Leary looking on from the audience, the 12 registered candidates answered questions on some familiar topics: immigration, Canadian values, even the issue of face coverings. And are we about to get our own taste of Trump-style politics on this side of the border? We're back with the Sunday Scrum, or as I like to call them, the left-wing media elite.
Left-wing? Oh my! I want my conservative credentials back.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that in this next round. Susan Riley, freelance journalist. John Ibbotson of the Globe and Mail looking for his conservative credentials. And Katie O'Malley of the Ottawa Citizen. Well, John, I have to start with you. Let's go with Kelly Leitch, who manages to grab the headlines every time. Here's what Leitch told Anna Maria Tremonti a couple of months ago. Take a listen.
You know, Donald Trump is ahead of you on this. He's proposing extreme vetting. Is that the same thing?
Look, I understand the compulsion to try to paint the conversation about Canadian values in that light, but this isn't the same thing, and I don't think that that's fair.
And this is what she said at Wednesday's debate, less than a day after Trump won.
Mr. Trump and I have a few things in common, like screening on immigrants. I plan to talk to him about that, but also to talk to him about his tough stance on NAFTA. And I will be someone he respects across the table.
All right. Reaction from our panel. I can hear it already. John, I said it'd start with you. Go for it.
Well, first of all, small c, conservative credentials. Look, we have a conundrum here. Kelly Leitch has decided that the best way to win the leadership of the Conservative Party is to surf the Donald Trump wave. This is wrong on so many levels. First of all, John Diefenbaker, Brian Mulroney, and Stephen Harper had one thing in common, which was all three Conservative prime ministers advanced the cause of immigration in this country. And so she is completely outside the mainstream of her own party. But the more we talk about Kelly Leitch and whether or not her position on vetting is racist, the more oxygen we give her campaign, just as the media in the United States gave Donald Trump the necessary oxygen when he was running for the nomination for the Republican presidential candidate. So the more we talk about it, the more we, in essence, validate what it is she's saying and promote her. I think one thing that will have to happen is that if Ms. Leitch is going to take this position, if she is going to be, I'm the Trump-like candidate against all the rest of you, all the rest of them need to resolve who is going to be the dominant opponent to her, whether it's Erin O'Toole or Lisa Raitt or Andrew Scheer or Michael Chong. One of the reasons Donald Trump won was that the other side of the argument couldn't decide who would be the champion against Trump.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives better not make the same mistake here.
Well, Leitch is off to an early lead with the support of 19% of Conservatives polled. And, of course, considering what happened on Tuesday, we need to be cautious about poll results. But it seems to, suggest what you're saying is correct. She's getting a lot of oxygen. Susan, what do you think?
I think that also there was a poll, again, not to be trusted entirely, in September, saying that she had 2% when it was the general population. In other words, not conservatives. She has succeeded in imitating some of Trump's methods, picking fights with other people on the stage. Lisa Raitt, Michael Chong, whom she suggested had accused her of being a racist, which gave her an opportunity to say, I'm not a racist. I don't think she is a racist either. But Chong never said that. So she's using some of his very divisive tactics, and she's using some of his lines. And anybody who disagrees with her or critiques her, such as I'm doing right now, is part of the left-wing media elite. So that would include, by the way, Jason Kenney and Peter MacKay, both of whom have been very wary of her focus on this Canadian values issue. I think she's right about Canadian values. The ones she outlines in her policy paper are I think we would all agree, equality of men and women, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, generosity and compassion. I think all of those they're universal values in some cases, but they resonate in Canada. The problem is, she hasn't given any practical information about how she would ensure that all of the 1.3 million people who come to Canada every year, A, how do you manage to interview them all? And B, how do you know they're not lying? How do you really do what she's claiming to do? And can I just say one final thing?
Yeah.
Terrorism everybody's afraid of the next terrorist incident. It's a real fear that she's addressing. But how realistic is the fear? How much danger do terrorists pose to Canadian lives compared, say, to the 30 children every year who are murdered by their parents in Canada? One of those murders happened in Saskatchewan, where the Conservatives were debating, or the up to 100 people who are victims of intimate partner violence, who are basically. So in other words, there is murder going on. There are innocent people's lives at threat, but not by the things that Kelly Leitch seems obsessed by.
This is a successful way of doing business right now. And for this populism style of politics, Brexit, some European countries, to work, you have to have a large group of people who feel the establishment, the elite, or immigration has denied them their ability to make a living, a decent wage usually, and or the other, as I say, immigrants who they blame for taking their jobs or threatening their security. Do a large enough group of Canadians really feel that way to make Leitch's proposals stick? John, or Katie?
I just have to say, we got to remember that the Canadian system, I always say that some people roll their eyes because she's going all process again, but getting elected leader of the Conservative Party is a completely different process than being elected the Republican nominee in the U.S. Kelly Leitch has to convince a relatively small proportion of the population that hold Conservative memberships to support her, and they have to do it in ridings that have equal weight. So in terms of addressing, you can't really transpose the Trump campaign strategy and put it onto the Conservative leadership race. You just can't. It doesn't work. It's like taking backgammon and putting it on a chessboard. That said, if she were to win, that's when we would see if she tried to take that same strategy nationwide. But again, I think we're way behind in terms of that actually happening. It's a high risk strategy. It may be high potential gain, but at the moment, just looking at the numbers and the process and the way Conservatives actually elect a party leader, I would not be betting on Kelly Leitch right now.
John, what do you think?
There may be in Atlantic Canada, which is the last part of Canada that is still largely rural, in Quebec, outside Montreal, in the rural parts of central Ontario, where I come from, in parts of the prairies, there may be a white nativist anti-immigrant vote that's still out there. But we are, not only is it a completely different process, as Katie points out, we are a very different country. We are a country where 20% of the population was not born in this country. And if you want to get elected to the leadership of a major political party, and especially if you ever want to become prime minister, you have to appeal to those voters, those immigrant new Canadians living in the suburbs outside Toronto, living in the suburbs outside Vancouver and Montreal. And if you come across with that kind of rhetoric and that kind of tone, they will turn against you and you will be defeated. You will lose. Kelly Leitch's prescription for winning the leadership of the Conservative Party may or may not be a winning strategy in terms of the party itself. I don't think it is. But even if it were to be a winning strategy, though, it would be fatal when she entered the general election.
A lot of people are pointing to Canada and saying, that we are you hear it in Foreign Affairs magazine, you see it in this book that has been written recently, that we're one of the 10 most successful countries in the world right now, The Economist magazine. What is it about Canada and the way we do things in this country that people think seems to make us immune from this kind of populism?
I put it down to what I call a culture of accommodation. The country was founded by the French and English, who at the time had been at war with each other for about 700 years in Europe. The only way we could get along was just respecting each other's space, not trying to impose anything, any set of values on each other. That culture of accommodation has worked incredibly well for bringing in millions upon millions of immigrants from all over the world and making us, yes, the world's most truly successful multicultural state. As long as we hang on to that, we'll be fine.
And we're also a big country with a lack of people and with an aging population. And so John mentions the Maritimes, and on the contrary, yes, there may be people who are resentful of immigrants, very few of whom end up going to the Maritimes, by the way. But I just saw a story the other day of somebody in Halifax who'd hired a couple of Syrian refugees to work in his bars and was thrilled to have these new, younger workers that he could call upon. And the experience, the personal experience of the many Canadians, for example, who've sponsored Syrian families, and of a lot of other Canadians, the notion, the hunch, is that immigrants work harder. And also that we have to import innovators because we have a very complacent capitalist class. We're not an innovative nation. We've rested too long on our natural resource exports. And I think the benefits of immigration are more widely applauded in this country than some of the dangers that Kelly Leitch is trying to point out.
Okay, Katie, what do you think? What do you think it is about the Canada mystique right now?
Well, I tend to take a rather cynical view in the sense that I can remember just a year or two ago, Canada was getting the same international magazines were sort of suggesting Canada was on a downward slope. So you go up, you go down on these sorts of scales. But I think that now it's a combination. Part of it is absolutely Justin Trudeau. He kind of captured the world's attention for at least a brief period of time there and is sort of rightly or wrongly seen as being this breath of fresh air. And I think because of that, a lot of that is kind of reflecting on the country as a whole. It's not clear if we would be getting the same coverage if, we still had Prime Minister Stephen Harper in place. That said, I agree with both Susan and John that this country has always historically been, it's kind of ironic because we're both multicultural, we're all about the mosaic as opposed to the melting pot, but at the same time, in terms of integrating communities into the broader political class and broader political public, I think Canada is quite a bit ahead of the United States.